argument out of the way, let's get to this particular story. Remember the story about the CCJ, ladies and gentlemen? And you see the JLP media outlets trying to use this as momentum to, tear down the CCJ because they don't want to have any part of it. Well, we're gonna get into that and you know, something that has happened with PJ Patterson. Well, let me go to PJ Patterson's story first, and then I go to that. Patterson calls for global South unity, ladies and gentlemen. All right, and when Patterson come out on talk, him not come talk no idleness, right? And so I'm going to explore this particular article right here. Let's read.
Iglina Classifieds. Former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson has called for the abandonment of separatism and division by the Global South, urging its nations to unite in defense of a fairer global order. The former Prime Minister made the call in a message submitted to the first international colloquium, Fidel, Legacy and Future, convened in Havana, Cuba, to mark the centenary of the birth of Castro, the deceased former president of that nation. The colloquium, organized by the Fidel Castro Raz Center together with Cuban academic and cultural institutions, opened at the Havana Convention Center on Monday and will conclude tomorrow, 100 years to the day since Castro's birth. It has drawn more than 1,500 delegates from some 60 countries. Patterson advised organizers that a convergence of circumstances had made it impossible for him to attend in person, expressing considerable regret at his absence. His disappointment, he noted, was greater because of his standing as the sole surviving participant in the historic summit held in Port of Spain in December 1972, but which the leaders of the four then independent Caribbean states resolved to establish full diplomatic relations with Cuba and end its isolation in the hemisphere.
Wow! So out of those four leaders, only Patterson is alive right now? Wow, that's historic right there. Tap up the screen for me, guys. Double tap the middle of the screen if you're watching on your phone. On Bolo TVV and Bolo VNR, Bolo VNR and TikTok. Yeah, man, let's get the likes up, ladies and gentlemen. And share the live for me, please. Thank you. Share the video. Appreciate it.
Hemisphere. That decision, he emphasized, was an exercise of sovereign right taken in pursuit of a zone of peace in our single space, undertaken without any calculation of the benefits that would follow. In the decades since, programs have been spawned, including medical brigades, educational scholarships, disaster relief, and technical expertise. He said these programs have been provided by Cuba without a single conditionality and without any request for reciprocity of any kind. Speaking of the man he was privileged to know, Patterson described Castro as a warrior for human dignity everywhere and a champion who was an invincible foe to injustice anywhere, a leader who believed in the sovereign equality of nations regardless of size, military might or economic power. He recalled Cuba's sacrifice in Angola, which he credited with hastening the end of apartheid and advancing political liberation across the African continent. He characterized Castro as a quintessential strategist and simultaneously the supreme tactician who invested in human resources what Cuba lacked in natural ones. Turning to the present, Patterson pointed to what he termed the reincarnation of the Monroe Doctrine in an even more repulsive edict, the dismantling of the multilateral system and the emergence of a new imperium with its flagrant disregard of international law. His prescription was unambiguous. South solidarity is pivotal to our survival and future well-being, he stated, calling on the Global South to honor the memory and precepts of Castro and forge instead a single phalanx to fashion that new global architecture which is inclusive, fair, and sustainable for every man, woman, and child on planet Earth. The Global South describes developing, less developed, or historically poorer nations, broadly encompassing countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and parts of Asia and Oceania. It serves as a modern alternative to terms like Third World. Patterson called for every participant in the colloquium and every nation that holds sacred the essence of the human condition to condemn, deplore, resist and render adequate relief in response to what he described as the cruel, repugnant and unlawful fuel tourniquet and the punitive embargo imposed on Cuba. Patterson closed his message by invoking Castro's own words from the dock in 1953, proclaiming the clear, incontrovertible verdict that history had already absolved him in full.
Mighty God, people, I don't need to say a word. Patterson said it all. You know that man is not lacking in eloquence where literature is concerned, ladies and gentlemen. Right? Loud and clear, Mr. Patterson. Loud and clear. And we all know who he's talking, and we all know, you understand? Now, editorial, the CCJ must flounder. Let's listen what they're saying here, man. Let's listen what they're saying here, ladies and gentlemen.
Sports. The Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, is facing an immediate reputational crisis and a potential erosion of confidence in the court. The situation demands urgent action by the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission, RJLSC, whose members include former Jamaican Appeal Justice Hilary Phillips, and, if necessary, Caribbean Community, CARICOM, heads of government, to stem a potential long-term erosion of confidence in the CCJ. That situation would only be to the benefit of those in the region who would have Caribbean countries cling to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council as their apex court. This state of affairs is not primarily because of the allegations of authoritarian tendencies and panel fixing made against the court's president, Winston Anderson, by several CCJ judges. The court finds itself in this predicament because some individual or group chose to leak emails that circulated between a highly restricted group of people, the CCJ justices. At first look, the complaints against Justice Anderson, contained in the emails published by Trinidad and Tobago's Express newspaper on Sunday, are personally and institutionally damaging, especially for a court that is still attempting to persuade the majority of CARICOM members to accede to the criminal and civil jurisdiction. All CARICOM members participate in the CCJ in its original jurisdiction, interpreting the treaty under which the community functions. Disagreement over a judge's dress code. The new public fracas started as a disagreement over a judge's dress code, which several justices felt that the president was seeking to push through the RJLSC, which he chairs, without sufficient consultation. This soon escalated into complaints of Justice Anderson's management of the court, including accusations that he attempted to stifle judicial independence, and a claim by a Nigeria-born judge, Chili Ebo Osuji, who had earlier accused Justice Anderson of dictatorship in the dress code matter, that he was removed from a panel for a case because the president was itching to reverse or chisel down the decision that all 7 judges of the CCJ rendered in the TCL versus Guyana in 2009, when you were not yet at the court. Apparently, the case from which Justice Ebo Osuji was removed covered several of the principles dealt with in TCL, in which the CCJ, acting in its original jurisdiction, affirmed that corporate entities had legal standing to sue sovereign CARICOM members for breaches of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. The ruling was considered a seminal development for CARICOM's transformation to a genuine single market and economy. Another judge, Trinidadian Patrick Jomadar, broadened his earlier disquiet over the dress code to concerns over how Justice Anderson ran the court. Among his examples was the president's approach to the CCJ's decision to empower a Guyana magistrate to go ahead with extradition proceedings against Guyana's opposition leader, Bazruddin Mohammed, and his father, Nazar Mohammed. Justice Jomadar said he experienced Justice Anderson's conduct at a judges' conference on the Mohammed's matter as an attempt to influence the opinions of colleagues that differed from yours in an authoritative manner. Full, frank discussion needed. Justice Anderson might have authoritarian tendencies and has created a toxic environment at the CCJ. But 3 facts are to be noted. Justice Anderson's version of events is not known. A public statement by him would probably do more damage. It's hard to fathom that Justice Anderson, by mere aggression, without intellectual heft, could intimidate highly accomplished judges to adopt his interpretation of the law. It is not unknown for apex courts to overturn precedent, as famously happened in the United States in Roe v. Wade. Neither is it unprecedented for there to be sharp differences in judicial philosophy between judges. Such is the case between members of the liberal and conservative wings of the Supreme Court of the United States. In some instances, the work environment is dysfunctional and hostile, as Bob Woodward and Scott Armstrong revealed about the Warren Burger Court, 1969 to 1986, in their 1979 book, The Brethren. In 2018 in India, 4 senior judges on the Supreme Court of India openly revolted against Chief Justice Deepak Mishra. At a press conference, they accused the Chief Justice of, among other things, selectively appointing judges to hear politically sensitive cases. The Indian judiciary survived that episode, which is the closest parallel to the situation at the CCJ. But India is a vast country of over 1 billion people, many of whom are not as close to events as is the case in the small islands of the Caribbean. Moreover, despite the respect it has gained for the quality of its jurisprudence, the CCJ is still a young court. It has many detractors hoping for missteps to undermine its credibility and any perception that this region is capable of sustaining a high-quality final court. The leakers would or ought to have been cognizant of this. The RJLSC, with Justice Anderson recused from those meetings, must aggressively get ahead of this crisis. It has to determine what, if any, substance there is in the complaints against Justice Anderson, and whether this is a matter on which the heads of government should invoke their disciplinary authority over the president. Perhaps the situation only needs a full and frank discussion between Justice Anderson and the other justices, except for the leaking of private and sensitive emails. If it were a judge who released the documents, that person would have breached the CCJ's Code of Judicial Conduct and could no longer be on the bench. Someone else would likely be guilty of contempt of court and, perhaps, breaches of Trinidad and Tobago's cybersecurity laws. Electronic security must be a major issue for the CCJ.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you hear the context of what happened at the CCJ, and this is my thing, because I know that the JLP media and JLP is using this. They have already started because they don't want to be a part of the CCJ. They want to build a corrupt court in Jamaica that they can control. You understand? So they can continue with their crimes and against the people of Jamaica, where illicit enrichment is concerned and corruption. Amen. So it is in their best interest to go against the CCJ. I will say this though. If the CCJ is having problems, which any group can have problems, if you're going to destroy the CCJ and tear down their credibility as if they cannot overcome this, you think a final court in Jamaica is not going to have issues with the people between them one another, even if it don't come out in the public? You think that's going to happen? I would tell you that you are definitely not thinking if you believe that. And that's where I'm going to leave it. However, the People's National Party hit back because Tavares Finson make some statements about, the CCJ, and they know Mark Golding's position, which is opposite of the Jamaica Labour Party. So of course they came out, ladies and gentlemen. We knew they would. But let's hear what the People's National Party has to say, man. And Mark Golding specifically.
Sports. The People's National Party, PNP, has hit back at Senate President Tom Tavares Finson over his recent comments on Jamaica's proposed accession to the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, as the country's final appellate court. The opposition said Tavares Finson's position reflects an attitude that disregards the fundamental issue of ensuring that all Jamaicans, regardless of their economic circumstances, have meaningful access to justice at the highest level.
There it is. Because them rich and them have money, they're not business about poor people. They're not consider we. So they want to hold on pan privy council when none of we can go access. And anytime this system fails us, we don't have a good court like the CCJ to go to. So they want to continue to keep us into a environment of involuntary and indirect and sometimes direct abuse by the decisions that they're making or not making.
In a statement Wednesday, the PNP took issue with Tavares Finson's declaration that it would be reckless for Jamaica to commit to the CCJ. The opposition argued that such a position exemplifies what it described as the uncaring, disrespectful attitude of government leaders towards Jamaicans, the vast majority of whom it says are economically challenged.
I agree. What would be reckless is putting a final court in Jamaica, and we know the corruption status in the country. That would be reckless. That is exactly what would be reckless. This I'm going towards the CCJ would be the opposite of reckless. They should have been gone towards the CCJ. This is an issue that just came up. You understand? But we understand what the JLP is doing, man.
Challenged. The PNP said access to justice from Jamaica's highest court remains an unimpeded right largely enjoyed by the wealthy. It also accused government leaders of having gone as far as breaching the Jamaican constitution through the use of pre-signed letters of resignation in an effort to preserve the existing arrangement. For Finson and his colleagues, there is nothing reckless in a situation in which the overwhelming majority of our people are deprived of the privilege of access to justice, the PNP said. For them, that is a situation in which justice reigns. The opposition also criticized what it described as Jamaica's continued attachment to the British Privy Council, 64 years after independence. The PNP argued that there was nothing reckless or degrading about the decisions of other Caribbean countries to adopt the CCJ as their final court. It pointed specifically to Guyana, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, and St. Lucia, which it said had committed to the regional court and taken developmental steps to grant their citizens greater access to justice. The party said Jamaica should similarly move towards a final court that is accessible to its people as part of the country's transition to full constitutional independence. Access to justice should never be determined by wealth, the PNP said. The party reiterated its commitment to what it described as Jamaica's journey towards genuine judicial independence, arguing that this must include a final appellate court that is accessible to ordinary Jamaicans. Andre Williams.
Jamaica, if you agree, let me know what you guys think in the comment section, alright? Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Big up Unforgettable Truth. That's you. Big up yourself. Tell me what you guys think about that. Like, share, and subscribe, my people. Like, share, and subscribe.